Okay, so we started recording. I would like to just start with a small introduction. So welcome everyone to this webinar that is focused on John Hagel's new book, The Journey Beyond Fear. I would just like you to know a little bit about myself. I'm the director for a center we call the Ren and Hui Silicon Valley Center. It's in the very heart of the valley on Menlo College, and it was founded in 2020. So it's less than a year
Wird das
old.
aufgezeichnet? Ich kann das auch irgendwann anders gucken.
So sorry, I think we need to mute. If we have several communications going on, we need to mute. Okay, sorry for that. Okay, so let's go. So we started in 2020, and it was actually a reaction because we thought that a lot of what we are taught from consultancy and also from business schools is really old stuff. It's management theories from the 1900s, and many with me are very frustrated that the pace is not going faster in educating people about the new management. So John Hagel and I met, and we share the same, I think, mission and quest. We are really looking for this new management model and also to share that with the world. So we started a center in 2020, and we collaborate at the center. And what we offer is new generation of business webinars as this one, and also certificate courses. And we will come back to this. And today, I have the great honor to have John Hagel with me. And John Hagel is known widely for his work on strategy and organization transformation with a broad range of large global companies and organizations. And he is also an active contributor to organizations like the World Economic Forum and Singularity University. So you might have met him through a Singularity University context before. So John, you have written a new book, and my thought was that I will ask some questions, and then I will let you come in and ask questions, and then I continue to ask some questions, and then you come in again. So we will try to have a sort of a disciplined approach, but still very highly interactive. So we will try to make that work today. So I hope that is fine with you. And yeah, so coming back, John, you created this new book, The Journey Beyond Fear. And maybe you should start. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, the catalyst, I started writing the book 3 years ago, and what struck me was I was traveling around the world as part of my business activities, and everywhere I went, the dominant emotion that I was encountering was fear at the highest levels of organizations, lowest levels, out in the community. And while I think fear is understandable, I think there are reasons for fear, I also view it as a very limiting emotion. And I believe we all have the need and the opportunity to make this journey beyond fear and cultivate emotions that will help us to have much greater impact that's meaningful to us.
Mm. So John, I think maybe your headphones are sort of disturbing the sound a little bit. Would it be possible for you to try without them?
Well, generally they work very well. Does this work better or no?
Okay, we'll try. If you have a hard time to hear, just let us know. So okay, so next question. So John, you're talking about something that is very dear to my heart in your book, and that you say that we are in a very early stage of a big shift, and that big shift started already in the 1960s. It's not a new thing. It started already in 1960 with digital technology coming. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit about what is this big shift, and why should we worry? I mean, if you are sitting in a traditional company today, or being an employee in a traditional company, why does this matter for me?
Well, I think that there are many reasons. I mean, I've been doing research on the big shift for decades now, and there are many forces that are shaping this big shift. Certainly, digital technology is a key one in terms of both creating much more access to computation, affordable computation, and creating much more connectivity on a global scale. And so that has enormous consequences in terms of how we organize, how we operate, how we live our lives. And it would take a whole book to go through the big shift and its complexity. But certainly one of the elements of the big shift, one way of describing the big shift, is that it is forcing us to shift our institutions from a model of scalable efficiency to a model of scalable learning. And what I mean by that is the way most large organizations operate around the world today, it's based on a model of become more efficient, do things faster and cheaper at scale. That is the key to success.
Recording in progress.
Uh-oh. Is somebody, I don't know if somebody needs to mute or, anyway, so scalable efficiency is the model that we're largely operating on today, even though there's more and more evidence that that model is becoming less and less efficient. And in its place, what we need is to implement an institutional model of scalable learning, where it's all about how do we help everyone in the organization to learn faster together. And that's a fundamentally different model, requires major transformation, and few, if any, organizations yet are making that transition.
Right, and you explain that in the book, and I think in a very good way, where you compare the traditional organization where managers is more or less distributing the tasks, and employees are assigned to do those tasks, and not really forced to or encouraged to learn or to constantly improve, but just do as is, more or less. So does anyone have a question as of now? I would like to just let people in to ask a questions, and you can ask out in the forum directly.
Annika, I've got a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
It's Matthew. I was just thinking that, the scalable efficiency and the scalable learning, isn't the reality that we need both of them kind of alongside each other? We don't really move from one to the other. We need a sort of a way that knits them together and makes sense to people, because we're never going to drop the kind of productivity, efficiency, that kind of order drive that organizations have. That was just something that came up. I think you, anyway, let me know if I've understood that right or wrong, John. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess there's a whole school of thought within the academic world about what they call ambidextrous organizations. We need organizations that will explore and exploit. They'll do both together. I defy anyone to tell me one organization that does both of those well. I think that they are in fundamental conflict with each other. And in my experience, the scalable efficiency model, I don't know, we're getting some static, but I hope you can hear me. The scalable efficiency model inevitably crushes the scalable learning model. And that the issue for me is the scalable, yes, we want to be more efficient, but actually the way we're going to be more efficient is by learning faster together. But the way we've achieved efficiency in the past is by tightly specifying every task. You just follow the manual. Don't deviate from the manual. Don't ask questions. And in that kind of world, that's becoming more and more inefficient, because we're continually being confronted with new situations that aren't part of the manual. We need to learn how to deal with those on the spot, in the moment. Right. And I believe everyone in the organization needs to embrace the scalable learning model so that we can all become much more efficient in a rapidly changing world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
John, can I break in here?
Of course.
what you are just talking about, the scalable learning, and that things are speeding up dramatically. We as human beings, we cannot comprehend it anymore. So is there not a limit on that scalable learning as we know it today? And is that not the bridge that we are moving towards AI and those kind of supportive technology to make our life easier?
Yeah, a whole other conversation. I think certainly the learning is, the pace of change is accelerating. I believe we as human beings have an infinite capacity for learning, if given the right environment and the right encouragement and cultivating the right emotions. If we're driven by fear, we are not going to learn as fast as we need to learn. And I believe AI can be extremely helpful, but it is limited in the sense that God knows, maybe it can change in the future at some point, but it is an analytic tool that helps us to address the unforeseen situations that we're facing. But in the end, it's up to us to see the situations, to ask the right questions, and then use AI to help us to learn, for sure. But I don't think we're ever going to eliminate the need for humans to be part of that learning process.
And if I can break in here, I think this paradox is really interesting, because I think it's very worthwhile discussing. So I mean, if you take I've been looking at a company like General Electric Appliances that did a huge transformation of themselves. And of course, they still have a huge focus on efficiency in manufacturing, for example, right? But it's also focused on learning, because they now it's automation, it's AI, machine learning, and that the machine more and more learn quickly, which means that it's becoming efficient. So it's an interesting paradox, and we need to really understand. But I agree with John Hagel that overall the principles for management are changing. And that we need to learn quicker. And sometimes it might be machines, and sometimes, it's the human beings, but we all need to move faster and learn faster. Anyway, I would like to focus on another question, which I don't really understand, but you emphasize that in your book. You say that return on asset for all public companies between 1965 and 2019 has decreased by 75% in 11 out of 13 industries. And I don't understand why. What is happening here? And is this a global phenomenon, or was that in the US?
Yes, I should clarify, the research that I did was for the US, for all public companies in the United States. I haven't done the research, but I believe there are similar trends around the world. And I would say that the decline of 75% is across all industries. 11 out of the 13 have seen a significant decline in ROA. The two that were exceptions saw some very limited decline, but still some decline. And I think it's just an indication that the scalable efficiency model that we have all held on to is becoming less and less efficient and more inefficient. And I think that, the way I describe the big shift, one way I have of describing it is that it is creating mounting performance pressure on all of us. The first thing is competition is intensifying on a global scale. We're facing more and more intense competition. Second element is the pace of change accelerating. Product life cycles are compressing at a dramatic rate. It used to be if you had a great product out there, you could sit back and relax. No more. Now it's what's next and how quickly can you get that into the market? And then as if that weren't enough, because of all the connectivity we've created on a global scale, some small event in a faraway place in the world cascades into an extreme event that disrupts our best laid plans and programs. And there I mentioned pandemic in that context. I think that's just one example of the extreme events that we're seeing and will continue to see over the decades. And in that kind of environment, again, we're becoming less and less effective in addressing that environment. An ROA decline of 75%. Pay attention. Why is nobody paying attention to that?
Right.
And so I should say too, I focused on return on assets because public companies are using financial engineering to insulate the investors from the impact of all this pressure. They're buying more stock of their stock back. They're paying higher dividends. They're adding more debt to their balance sheet. There are all kinds of ways that public companies have of insulating the investors from a lot of this pressure. But the pressure, return on assets, to me, is the fundamental economics of the company itself before you get into the financial engineering. I think it's something worth paying attention to.
What I found interesting in the book as well is that it seemed to be a momentum 22. So this mounting pressure, creating fear, stress, which in turn turns into even, you know, a continued short-sighted mindset. And you talk about the zero-sum view where, you know, either we win and you lose, but there cannot be a win-win for both. And it seems to just be like a down, you know, moving spiral, not only for the company, but maybe for the whole country, if you don't tackle that kind of fear and that kind of pressure and be able to move beyond it. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think that that's the reason why I'm so driven to write this book, because again, while I think the fear is understandable, if you're facing this mounting performance pressure, yes, there's a reason to be afraid. If you're seeing the return on assets come down at such a dramatic rate, yes, reasons to be afraid. But if you're just afraid, you're never going to find a way to move beyond that and really, again, have impact that's meaningful. And I think that one of the challenges is a lot of our executives and leaders of organizations are driven by ambition, where they just want to get to higher and higher levels of status and income. And they don't have, and that gives them a lot of fear, because if you look at the lifetime of an average CEO, at least in the United States, it's shrinking at a dramatic rate. CEOs are turning over at a more and more rapid rate. Again, reasons to be afraid, but I don't think it's sufficient to be afraid.
Do you think, I mean, sometimes I think about that myself, that, you know, we have been discussing also in the Drucker Forum, the World Drucker Forum, you know, what is wrong with management and leadership, and why is it not changing faster? And it seems to be so many leaders out there that are not, you know, this kind of new kind of leaders. Do you have any view on that? I mean, this fear, this kind of behavior from leaders, not maybe, you know, maybe they are not capable of actually creating this scalable learning model that you think is necessary. Do we need a new generation of leaders?
It's less about a new generation of leaders, because I think all generations are at this point consumed by fear. So it's much more around how do we help all individuals, including our leaders, to move beyond fear. And one of the things that I think the reason that we're seeing so much pressure within the CEO ranks and unwillingness to change is because they were taught from an early age, you know, just find a profession that can give you a large, high income and a lot of status and success, and focus on that. And if you have passion, forget about it. Just be off, you know, do that as a hobby or whatever after hours. And I think that increasingly what we need are leaders who are driven by passion. They're excited by the challenges that they're facing. They're not driven by fear. They're wanting to use the challenges as an opportunity to learn faster and have even more impact in whatever environment they're in. So I think that's the big issue, is how do we get leaders to develop that passion that will help them to act in very different ways.
I have a feeling that we have questions here about that. How do you develop that kind of passion among leaders so they actually can move beyond this kind of short-term and mindset and fear? Any question about from anyone here? Or comment?
I have a comment, and I think we need a profound discussion about this. What I see, and also I agree with John that so many things are accelerating, and what we are accelerating is also the fear, and the fear was 60 years ago there as well. Only we were not able to act as fast as what we can do today. So today there is a lot of information going around us that makes us that we don't feel confident in what we are doing or comfortable in what we are doing. So our reaction is fear, flight or fight. That is basically what is happening. But if you really look at what we are doing, we are now in a kind of rat race of producing stuff faster and faster and faster. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we need all that stuff?
Right.
And is there a balance? And if you are missing the boat, you are missing the boat in producing stuff that we probably don't need. And if you are not producing it in a certain amount of time, then someone else will do that. And the question beyond that is, do we need it, and where is the balance? We are making ourselves and our society completely mad with this kind of.
Okay.
Right, Sandy.
With this kind of mechanism, and that altogether is I think also part of that fear. But we have to go back, I think, and that is the coming up of all the ideas of circular economy and those kind of things, to think a little bit different. And I go back to Kahneman, think fast, think slow. I think we have to get into a mode of thinking slow instead of fast.
Right.
It's so impulsive what we are doing because of everything around us makes us that we have to act fast and forget to think a little bit deeper. I'm working closely with Salim Ismail about purpose-driven organizations, and we are using, and that the term also comes from John, I think, MTP, massive transformative purpose. I changed it in inclusive, massive transformative purpose, because that inclusiveness is what we forget.
Right.
We don't think through, we don't scrutinize what that purpose actually is. And it is all translated in fast, producing, massive, etc. Maybe that is not right.
But coming back to that, John, you have a solution. In your book, you say that there are 3 things that can actually help an organization or help a leader to move beyond this fear. And I would love you to explain a little bit more. And I can bet that you have a lot of questions about this. So the first one is an opportunity-focused narrative, which you say act as a catalyst. And the next one is the passion of an explorer, which you say is like the fuel. And then the third thing is then the need of learning platforms that you viewed as accelerants. Could you elaborate on those 3 pillars, and why did you end up on those 3 as your framework sort of to move beyond this fear?
Yeah, well, again, it's based on a lot of research as well as my own personal experience. I've made a personal journey beyond fear, and each of those elements was particularly helpful to me. And based on my research, I believe it can be helpful to everyone. And it's the key question of what is it that will help you to overcome the fear. I don't believe that we're going to eliminate fear. That's not what my proposition is. We will continue to feel fear, but we will also have emotions that will excite us and motivate us to move in spite of the fear and have impact that's much more meaningful to us. So I will just say that the 3 elements are narrative, passion, platform. I just want to be clear in all 3 of those that I have very different definitions of those terms than most people do. So a key part of my book is at least explaining and sharing what I believe these three elements are and why they're so important in this journey beyond fear.
And for me, it really resonated what you said, that the narrative, a strong narrative can sort of, create this kind of stability in a very highly uncertain world. And that resonated really well with my own experience. I mean, if you're focused where you're going, right? Even if it's happening a lot of things around you, you're still focused. But how do you avoid not to be path dependent? I mean, if there are things happening around you that you actually need to adjust to.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just clarify what I mean by fear, by narrative, because we're talking about narrative. Everybody's going to think we're talking about stories. No, I make a big distinction between stories and narratives. Stories are typically self-contained. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end to them. The end, over. Also, stories are about the storyteller, or they're about some other people. They're not about you. You can use your imagination, but it's not about you. For me, a narrative is open-ended. There is some kind of big opportunity out in the future, not clear whether it's going to be achieved or not. And the resolution of the narrative hinges on you. It's a call to action, to say your choices, your actions are going to make a big difference here. What's it going to be? And I think in that context, it can be very powerful in terms of, again, pulling people out of the present, just saying, I'm just going to focus on what's going on today, and having a sense of what's the really big opportunity that's worth acting on and taking risk on and learning about. But it's also very much driven by a learning mindset of, okay, I'm going to take some steps towards that opportunity, but I'm going to learn from those steps and see what's working, what's not working, how I can evolve my approach so I can have even more impact. And doing it together with others so that we're all together learning versus I'm just sitting there in my cubicle trying to figure this out. So I think, yeah.
So I mean, yes, so you elaborate really well, I think, around why a narrative is not a story and what makes a strong narrative. And you say that can actually help to create some kind of stability in this kind of crazy world and make you then move beyond the fear. But then you have to have this passion of the explorer, and that is not just any passion. I mean, here you deep dive into even a matrix where you discuss 4 different squares where you can be regarding passion. And you have 2 axes. One is improvement goals, where you say that either you're there for learning or for contribution. And you separate those 2, if I understand it correctly, and you need to tell me if I don't. And the second one is time frame, if I'm short-term mindset or long-term mindset. And where is this passion of the explorer on this one? On those kind of matrix and the 2 dimensions?
Yeah, well, as a longtime consultant, it's a classic 2x2 matrix.
Yep.
And the passion of the explorer is in the upper right-hand quadrant of the matrix. It's a very long-term commitment to a particular domain and having more and more impact in that domain. And I should say on the vertical axis, when I say learning and contribution, when I talk about learning in that context, it was learning in the passive sense of just acquiring existing knowledge. I want to learn more about this area and just learn about it. And I'm not going to do anything with it. I just want to learn about it versus, no, I want to contribute. I want to make more and more impact. And that requires significant learning, but it's a very different form of learning than just sitting back and listening to what other people have to say.
So if that passion of the explorer is more long-term and then contribution rather than just reading a book and learning a new topic or domain by reading, for example, what is the difference between that passion of an explorer and a sort of Silicon Valley entrepreneur? Because I mean, that is what I see a lot of our entrepreneurs have. That is long-term mindset. They are truly doing, contributing, right? And sort of creating this on the edge in a certain domain.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that certainly, again, I came up with this notion of passion of the explorer, and again, very specific attributes for that passion from many different environments, but certainly one environment that influenced me. I've spent over 40 years now in Silicon Valley, and you're right, many of the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley are driven by this passion of the explorer. They have a sense of a huge opportunity. They want to find a way to learn how to get there and move forward. I would caution, though, that it doesn't apply to all entrepreneurs. There are some entrepreneurs who are just driven by the money. I want to make $1 billion. How can I do that fastest? Okay, great. That's what I'm going to do. That's not passion of the explorer. That's obsession with money. On the other side, there's another form of passion that I have found in a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs that I call the passion of the true believer. And in that context, the people who have that kind of passion, they can describe in great detail what that long-term opportunity is. They have a detailed blueprint of everything that it will have. They also can describe in great detail every step that we need to take along the way to get to that opportunity. And the only question is, are you with me or are you against me? Don't dare ask any questions about either the opportunity or the path. I know that. You can either join me or stay away. And again, the passion of the explorer, those people have a sense of what the big opportunity is, but they also are very humble in realizing they don't know the opportunity in its full detail. They're going to learn about it as they go. And they don't know all the steps along the path. They have some ideas about some of the initial steps that we can take, but they're going to learn as they go. And that's a very different form of passion than the passion of the true believer. So, yeah.
So it's interesting because an organization then, if I would like to help any organization then to transform and actually start moving and capture, seizing those opportunities, they would need, the top leadership need to set some kind of, strong narrative. And it seems that there need to be critical mass of those people with passion of the explorer or slash, certain entrepreneurs. But then that is not enough. Then the third element, and now after this, I'm going to let everyone in asking a question. But the third element is, or component, is this learning platforms. And learning platforms, I mean, for me, when I read it, it's like, okay, you cannot do this yourself. And in order to accelerate your learning, you will not accelerate your learning in the most optimal, maximum way by sitting by yourself. So you need to interact with people, and you need to be, have those platforms to interact with people. But in your terminology, you really separate those platforms, and you even have a typology or a different kind of I think you talk about 4 different types of platform. Can you go a little bit more into that? What do you mean by learning platform and the different types of platform? And if you see that our platforms that we have today, are they good learning platforms or not?
No, the challenge for me is everybody again talks about platforms today. Platforms rule the world, but they don't talk about different types of platforms and what the pros and cons are of each one. So there's one type of platform that is widespread today that I call aggregation platforms. And these are just focused on facilitating short-term transactions, like buying and selling products. It could be a retail platform, but it's short-term transactions connecting 2 parties to make a short-term transaction. Second kind of platform is a relationship platform, where basically it's just helping people to connect with friends, family, broader networks of acquaintances, just so they can talk and share with each other. We all know about those kind of platforms. They're pretty widespread too today.
Yeah, like Facebook or.
Right. And the two types of platforms that I believe are not widespread today, but should be. One is what I call a mobilization platform, where the focus is how do we bring all the participants together to achieve and deliver some kind of shared outcome or product or service. And again, not many examples today. One that I think most people are familiar with that illustrates some of the potential is Wikipedia, a platform where they mobilize thousands of people to come together to develop a shared outcome, an online encyclopedia. Then there's a fourth category of platform. This is the one that excites me the most, and it's what I call a learning platform. And here I will emphasize that when I talk about learning, I'm not talking about learning in the form of sharing existing knowledge. Because most people, when I talk about learning platforms, say, oh yeah, we have all kinds of platforms where you can go sign up, listen to lectures, do classes. No. Yes, fine. There are platforms that do that. The learning that I'm talking about, again, is learning in the form of creating new knowledge, knowledge that did not exist before. And you can't do that in a classroom sitting listening to a lecturer. You can only do that through action. And one of my key principles, and this is developed more fully in the book, is this notion that, to your point, we're going to learn a lot better together than on our own individually. But I believe the core unit of that is a small group. I call it an impact group, typically anywhere between 3 to 15 people at most, because the goal is to develop deep trust-based relationships with each other and support and challenge each other in terms of learning faster to get more and more impact in whatever area matters to the group. And then, to me, the learning platforms provide a home for those small groups. They provide shared workspaces where these small groups can come together and develop those deep relationships with each other. But then they also create a broader network of relationships to connect the impact groups together so they can all learn. But the primary design goal of the platform is to help everyone learn faster by creating new knowledge, by acting together. And that's a very different kind of platform than what we have today.
Any questions from anyone regarding those three pillars? Strong narrative, the passion of the explorer, and the learning platform as important components to actually move beyond the fear.
I have a question. First of all, thank you, John, for the book. I had so many questions about today's challenges in the organization. You answered a lot, and also you confirmed a lot of fears or a lot of patterns I was seeing in those organizations. My question is really, how do we apply all this knowledge, all these discoveries in the real life, like some type of framework that will help me to help others to bring out their passion of explorer, to actually focus on their narratives? How do we inspire people to actually go back to their child selves where they were really passionate and they really remembered what they were like moving towards? I'm thinking more, how can I apply that in practice? And I don't know where to start. If you can help me there. It's not too much of a question or ask.
Yeah, no, I'm cautious in the book to say there is no magic formula.
No, there is no.
Step one, step two, step three, you'll get it all solved. No, it all hinges we're all as individuals very different. It's all gonna, the journey will differ depending on who we are and who we're interacting with. But I think in that context, my general advice is to start with yourself. And it's, first of all, reflecting on what are the emotions that are driving you today, because I find that many people today are driven by fear, but they're not willing to even acknowledge it to themselves, because fear is a sign of weakness. I don't want to be afraid. No, I'm not afraid. But until and unless we acknowledge our own fear, it's going to be hard for others to acknowledge their fear, because you're a strong person and you're telling me I should say I'm weak and afraid. No. But then I think to me, it's being a role model in terms of looking ahead and starting to frame opportunities that could be exciting, that first of all are exciting to you, so you can make visible that excitement that you have, and hopefully draw other people to you, say, wow, how can I get that excited? And then invite others. And I think one of the key things is asking what I call powerful questions, which is acknowledging that you don't know all the answers to how to get to that opportunity and you need help. So you're drawing others to you to say, you know, wow, I'd like to help. This is something that's really interesting and exciting. So I think it starts again with the individual and starts with looking ahead and shifting from, I think, again, most of us are driven by a view of the future that's threat-based. It's all about the threats versus, no, what's a really exciting opportunity? How can we start to come together around that and overcome that fear in ways that will, over time, draw more and more people to join us? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So John, we have a number of questions here regarding more, if you could become more sort of concrete regarding, for example, the main component of a narrative. How do you build up this narrative? What is it built on? And also, can you give an example on the learning platform?
Yeah, I think, so if we talk about narratives, I think there are many elements. I mean, the two key elements have to do with, again, a view of the future. And the key questions there is, are you framing the narrative around a threat or an opportunity? And then what's your call to action to others? Right? Do you have a call to action? Most of us I believe we all have a personal narrative that most of us have not even taken the effort to articulate. But most of us, because we're driven by fear, don't have a call to action to other people. We're just saying we're going to do it all ourselves. We can't afford to rely on anybody else. We can't trust them. They may let us down. And so I think just focusing on those two key components and then asking a set of questions. I mean, again, I go into a lot more detail of this in the book, but for example, in the opportunity, a key question to ask as you start to frame the opportunity out in the future is it consistent with and aligned with some of the long-term forces that are shaping the future? I mean, you can define an opportunity that's a total fantasy and it would never be achievable because the forces are against it and never going to allow it, versus no, what is an opportunity that these forces are actually starting to generate and that, you know, we can act on to achieve. And so I think that it's striking a balance again between, on the one hand, having enough detail in the opportunity so that it can start to excite and inspire people, but not infinite detail of everything is defined down to the last element. It leaves open, you know, a lot to be discovered as we move forward in terms of what that opportunity really is going to look like. And so it's having that enough detail, but not too much detail, so that we can inspire people to join us to find out what this opportunity really is all about.
You also mentioned in your book that I mean, we're talking about those two different kind of models, and even if we talk about them in different sort of maybe wording, I think most of us that share this quest of understanding where management is heading is agreeing with, I mean, we are fronting a whole new way of managing the firm. And you mentioned this, the scalable efficiency model, the scalable learning model. I mean, one thing that comes up in my mind is, I mean, what will this require? I mean, just HR, for example, in an organization. I mean, HR's role must change pretty dramatically, right? If you go from a scalable efficiency model with clear instructions and you know, a very sort of clear everything to a scalable learning model. Do you have any comment on that, John?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I believe if we take this seriously, everything changes. The role of HR fundamentally transformed. So I'm going to generalize, but broadly, HR in large organizations today are process managers. They have a whole set of processes around evaluation of employees, goal setting of employees, a whole range of things that are defined in great detail, and HR enforces. They're enforcers of these processes. Versus, again, viewing HR as catalysts to help people learn faster and develop faster. And a key part of that is creating environments that will support them in that effort and encourage them. And so I think that's a very different model that, you know, again, most HR organizations today have no, and again, HR talks about learning, but and it's a key part of HR, but it's all about training programs. You know, we have this employee at this stage in their career go to that training program, and then several months later, another training program. It's all about learning in that form versus learning on the job by creating new knowledge, by acting together, and by the way, by taking risk. Because if you're going to try new things, there's risk there. So, yeah.
Right. And you mentioned a number of components of the scalable learning model that also resonate very well with me, at least. You say that in this model, we have to focus on creating new knowledge, which is, you said, the most valuable learning. And we need to focus on creating impact. I remember an interview with Facebook's founder about, you know, the importance of having employees feeling that they actually can make an impact. And then the third one you mentioned is the small diverse teams. I mean, this is something I see in several organizations today that I would classify as innovative and more modern in its way of working. But do you think, what practices would you refer to? I mean, do you see any good example on this around the world? Who can we learn from?
You know, I don't think there are great examples. I think certainly in smaller entrepreneurial companies that have this passion of the explorer, you can see a lot of the practices. In many of the impact groups, I've again done research on impact groups around the world. I think I'll give a quick example. There's a diagnostics company, clinical diagnostics company, that's having big trouble in their call center operations. And one of the things they did was they went to the workers in the call center operations and said, look, you know, our customers are very unhappy. We need to figure out what the problem is and solve it. And they said, first thing we're going to do is we're going to promise all of you, none of you are going to lose your jobs. And your first assignment is to figure out how to get the technology to take over the most routine activities you're doing, because most of them are consumed with the scripts of here's how you answer this routine question or that routine question. No, let's get the technology to do that. And they worked with the technologists to figure that all out and offloaded a huge amount of their work to the machines. Then it freed them up to focus on what are the questions that are really new and different and challenging for us. And they came together into small groups. They called them pods to brainstorm and figure out how could they come up with better answers to those questions. Customer satisfaction went way up. The employee satisfaction turnover rates went way down because now these workers were making a difference. They weren't just following the manual that anybody could do if they could read the manual. No, they were seeing problems and opportunities that nobody had ever seen before and finding ways to have impact and create value for the customer. That was exciting.
And you also mentioned in the book, which I think is really interesting, also affecting HR, that companies are measuring engagement level, but they don't measure any passion level. What risk do you see with that?
Huge risk. Again, I think that I'll generalize, but everybody's got different definitions of worker engagement. But broadly, what most companies mean is, does the worker like the work they do? Do they like the people they work with? And do they respect the company they work for? That's an engaged worker. And yes, there's a lot of evidence that engaged workers perform at a higher level than non-engaged workers. So yes, that's worth pursuing, but it's not sufficient. There's nothing in there about excitement about going forward and having even more impact and taking risks. And that's where the passion becomes critical. Those people, passionate workers, are really excited about challenges and want more challenges and want to have more and more impact. The problem with engaged workers, by the way, is if you go to them and say, the world is changing out there, we're going to have to change the work you do, they're going to resist. No, wait a minute, I like the work I'm doing. Don't mess with it, don't change it. Passionate workers are excited. Yes, let's change. Let's figure out how we can have even more impact in this changing world. This is exciting. So again, I think we're missing, and in my view, I did a survey of the US workforce, and at most 14% of US workers have this kind of passion of the explorer about their work. So a tiny fraction. Wow. There's a huge opportunity to increase the passion levels in the workforce. But the challenge is most companies aren't even measuring it. And most companies are actually very hostile to passion. Passionate people ask too many questions. They take a lot of risks.
Yes.
They deviate from scripts. You know, oh, we want engaged workers who are happy doing what they do.
Yep.
So.
No, I mean, honestly, I don't think most companies actually want those people with passion of the explorer, because they are messing up in, you know, as is organization. But we have Matthew Messi here. He asked, did you answer the question about the learning platform? Is there a good learning platform today out there that we can learn from?
You know, I don't see any real solid examples in the sense of what I'm talking about. I think there are kind of suggestive platforms. I think some of the things that SAP has done with their network of application developers has elements of a learning platform to help their application developers learn together. Intuit has an interesting platform for bookkeepers to help them learn more about what's required for successful bookkeeping. But a lot of those are focused on sharing existing knowledge versus really motivating and focusing people on creating new knowledge. And I think that's what's really missing.
And we are almost at the end of the session, and I think it was a little bit depressing when I read a quote. I took a quote from your book where you say that all institutions are designed to limit our potential and keep us tightly constrained, performing tasks assigned to us. We need to rebuild our institutions so they can encourage people to make this journey beyond fear. And on September 16, John, you will lead a state-of-the-art business course for us at Menlo College. So would you like to say something about that course and why you think people listening right now should participate? What will they get out from that course?
Sure. Well, the course, as you specified, is really focused on business people and what does business need to do to be successful. The book that I just wrote has elements of that in it, but it's much more broadly addressed to everyone who's feeling fear. And it really focuses on, again, this notion of a big shift from scalable efficiency to scalable learning to say, what is it that leaders need to do if we're seriously committed to building scalable learning institutions where we can all learn faster together. And I will say that I talked earlier about mounting performance pressure in the big shift, which is absolutely happening. But at the same time, that those forces in the big shift are also creating exponentially expanding opportunity. We have the ability to create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than ever before. And the focus of this course is on what are the leadership approaches that are going to be required to address those opportunities and create exponentially expanding value.
Okay, so any last questions? I just chat the link to the course if anyone is interested, and you will get 20% discount as well as a thank you for being here today and being interested in sharing the same passion as we have. So any last question before we hang up today?
Can I ask a question?
Hmm?
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Please.
absolutely.
Thank you, Annika and John and everybody else here. John, you mentioned that you want to create a center to share programs related to this vision and this book and this wisdom, this body of wisdom.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, where are you planning this, and whether you will be inviting others who have similar visions and similar imprints that they want to bring into the world to collaborate and to co-create?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I'm a big, strong proponent that it's not going to be me alone. I need to bring together people, ask for help. And the center, I mean, I'm based in Silicon Valley and in the San Francisco area, but the goal of the center is to offer programs everywhere in the world. And partly through virtual means, but partly through gatherings in different parts of the world where we can help people, first of all, acknowledge the fear that they're experiencing, but more importantly, come together to make that journey beyond fear, and developing programs to help people do that.
And we at the center, we believe in working with people that share this quest and passion, and we actually we primarily work with people from outside that are really leading in their specific field, and we are building up a new program all the time. So absolutely, yes, just contact us if you are interested, or if you know anyone that it would be interested. And if you want to be also what do you call that? If you want to be, helping us to spread the word around the world through your own network, we also work with that kind of network and provide you special discount that you can bring to your people, to your followers that are following you. So we work with a lot of influencers around the world, and maybe you want to become an influencer as well and sort of join the community, because we believe that we need to move fast and we need to join forces. Thank you, everyone, and take care wherever you are. Please visit the website of the Rananoji Silicon Valley Center. You will find new webinars for free, and you will also find interesting courses to take. It's very short courses. You will learn tremendously much in a very short time. So thank you for now, and take care, all of you, and let's move beyond fear. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share this. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.